I've learned a few stick welding hacks throughout the years from watching these old heads work, and today that's what we're going to talk about. Now, there are things that are done by the book and that you learn by the book, and then there are things that you learn from experience. And whenever I was in welding school, I feel like I studied and practiced really hard to be ready for the industry. And right when I jumped into it, I knew that I better, pay attention more than I needed to have an opinion. But I was taught things and I witnessed a few things that aren't exactly by the book. As a matter of fact, some of the stuff is exactly what the book says not to do. It's likely that I'm going to be triggering a few of you by the book people in this video here, but stay tuned to the end. I swear I'm going to clear the water up a little bit. Let's start with more or less an obvious one. Not all the welding rods that you're going to weld with are going to weld the same. Depending on the rod diameter and the type of flux they are, they're going to weld a little bit differently. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily the amperage you weld these at, but more how you manipulate that arc length. Some welding rods, they'll like to have a further standoff, to have like a wider arc length to really manipulate the puddle the way you want. And some of them, if you do that, you're going to cause it a whole lot of issues, so it would prefer to have a tighter arc length. And then there's, of course, a few of them that kind of like a little bit of an in-between, where you have to find the perfect balance and maintain that certain arc length. And that goes for all these electrodes. Depending on the type of machine you're on, or depending on the welding position or the joint configuration, you can adjust that arc length as a welder to manipulate these rods the way you want to do it. Now, if you're having a harder time with your larger diameter electrodes, that's perfectly normal. Now, I don't want to step on anyone's toes when I say this, because I know that your instructors or someone teaching you is trying to teach you the right way with the right type of electrode. But if you're struggling, take a step down in rod size from the 1/8 down to a 332. You'll be able to turn your amperage down. You're going to deposit less metal. You're going to have a lot more control, and the rod's going to be a lot more forgiving. Then once you get the hang of that smaller diameter rod, then turn things back up and try to get good at the bigger diameter rod, because the real world wants real size rods, and that's just the way she goes. Next up, let's talk about what you see a lot of welders do, and that's bending this electrode in their stinger. I've seen welders do this, and I don't know if they know why they're actually doing it. They've got more bends in the rod than sense. But the reason why I like to bend a rod is typically if I'm working on smaller diameter pipe, or if I'm trying to work in a tight space, or if I'm trying to find the perfect angle on the electrode holder. I have all of the angles I could possibly want right there on this stinger. If it's a smaller diameter pipe that I don't need to make a full length weld with a full rod, I'll choke up on that electrode, removing some of that flux, usually just before those numbers, and that'll shorten that electrode up, and that seems to take out a ton of shake. Not to mention, if that's all the rod that I need to make it from bottom to top, then that's all I'm going to use. You have to be a little bit careful though. The back end of this is live, and if it touches something, it's going to light up. So I might even opt to cut the electrode in half and make a couple little shorties out of it. Don't get too carried away, because you're going to end up wasting a lot of material. I hate to say it, guys, but different brand rods, they run differently. And if you're trying to save yourself some money by buying some cheap electrodes, I'm telling you, it's worth it to spend some money, because they weld just a whole lot better. And that goes with any type of filler metal. But stick rods specifically, I've got my preference for sure. And I've even done some blind taste tests from manufacturers where they sent me unlabeled rods from different companies and said, I want you to try this out. It's supposed to all be the same rod. Check out the puddle characteristics, how well it holds an arc, and they all seem to run differently. Some of them were very well rounded and can do everything great. And some of those rods I wouldn't even put in your electrode holder. All that to say is it just reaffirmed my suspicions for having a preference for doing an open root compared to welding with a certain type of low hydrogen rod. Whatever it may be, I've got a brand for each one of them. That metal you're welding on needed some preheat, so why don't you think your stick rod don't? Picture this. It's a chilly December morning and you're doing a little bit of welding, and every rod you weld with seems to start with a little bit of a sluggish start, not as even, not as smooth, but later on in the bead it seems to look really good. Well, it might be just because your rod's just a little too cold. Now I'm talking general purpose stuff. I'm not talking about low hydrogen or keeping things in an oven where you don't need to do that. I'm talking general purpose, all your welding electrodes. If you want to give them a little preheat, you can brush them with a cutting torch if you got one next to you. But if you don't, you could always just stick the rod for just a second. Maybe count to 5. All that's going to do is put a little heat into the electrode and get it ripe and ready to weld. I truly believe in the right situation, that little bit of preheat goes a long way. Another way that you can give that rod a chance to just get lit and get ready for that tie-in is by making long tie-ins. I feel like the longer the better. Well, I remember whenever I was in welding school, I was always taught to fill in your weld craters, meaning you get to the end of your weld and you wait, you count a couple seconds, let that weld metal fill in the crater so you don't get a crater crack. That was worst case scenario. But when you're trying to make a tie-in, you want to do the exact opposite. You want to get to the end of the weld and then you want to stop. What that's going to do is leave a deeper crater and make room for your tie-in. And look, if you're trying to make a clean tie-in, you really shouldn't aim right for that crater. You want to start way ahead of it. You could start a couple inches, 3-4 inches ahead is a little bit much, but all you're trying to do is strike up ahead, get that arc length under control, give that rod a chance to get a little warm, and then you just burn out the trash in front of you. An easy sign to know that you're doing this wrong is if you're seeing porosity in your starts. That means you're lighting up right on top of it, you're long arcing it, that rod hasn't got a chance to get going, it's cold, it's lumpy, and it's got full of holes in it. You can really tell that this matters when you start trying these specialty welding electrodes like this 9045 low hydrogen downhill rod. It is a nightmare if you don't strike up way ahead of it and come back, otherwise you're just going to get full of Swiss cheese. If you seem to keep having a hard time when you stop welding with the 7018, trying to relight it, you're sitting there tapping, and it just doesn't seem to want to relight, it's because that little end right there, it's just going to form that little layer of slag right on the end, and that just kind of poses a problem as you try to tap it off on the table, scrape it with a file or on the concrete, and now you've got a kind of a crappy start to an electrode. Instead, I'll teach you what an old man taught me, and that's just give it a little flick when you're done. Basically, all that is whenever you're about ready to terminate that weld, flick that electrode. Be careful where you flick it, and so you don't fling a molten booger on your buddy or put an arc strike on material, but what that'll do is send that piece of slag flying, and now you've got no slag on the end of your electrode, and it is ready to restrike and ready to weld. The next hack is welding with these different electrodes on the polarities they weren't designed to do so. One great example for this is your 7018 weld. If you're trying to weld sheet metal, a 7018 is one of the last rods I'd want to use, as that it's on DCEP, and even if you crank the amperage way down, you're going to be putting hole after hole after hole. If this is all you got, the best thing you could do is switching the leads from DCEP to DCEN, and that's just putting the terminals over into the other. If you're running DCEP, your electrode is positive, that means the flow of electrons is going from your base metal towards the tip of your electrode. That's how it got its name DC reverse. Whereas if you're on DCEN or DC straight, the electron flow is going from the electron to your base metal. In layman's terms, this is basically going to change the heat from your base metal to your electrode or vice versa, whatever polarity you're running, and it's going to allow for shallower penetration when we're on this DCEN. So it makes for welding this sheet metal a lot more bearable. You might blow just a couple less holes, but I tell you what, it's a whole lot better than welding on DCEP, which is what the rod manufacturer says you have to weld it on. If there ain't a procedure, then don't tell me nothing. Then you have that classic old school hack where you take a 6010 electrode and you dip it in water. And if any QC or anyone that buy the book saw you dipping an electrode in water, which says like on every one of the packaging, do not get wet, they're probably going to have a couple things to say to you or probably have a little panic attack. But the main reason why anyone would want to dip a 6010 is unlike a 7018 that likes a really hot, dry place, 6010, that flux starts to dry out. It likes to fingernail on you really bad. And a fingernail typically is how the arc wants to burn off the end of the electrode. And if it's fingernailing it one way or the other where you didn't ask for it, it makes the arc go wherever the hell it wants. So the old school hack is taking the 6010, dipping it in a bit of water, wiping it down with a glove, kind of drying it off, but trying to put a little bit of life back in this electrode because it was probably a little bit too dry to start with. So ipso facto, there it goes, welding smooth as can be with just putting a little bit of water on your 6010. I'm not saying it's kosher, but I'm saying it welds a lot better. I want to give a huge shout out to today's video sponsor, which is ESAB. It blows my mind still that some people don't know who ESAB is, and they were the first company to invent the decoded electrode, which is kind of the subject of today's video. We've been using ESAB on the channel for years, and here in my personal shop, I use the ESAB Renegade Volt for most of my TIG and stick here in the shop, as well as doing some field stuff off the batteries too. Super portable, super awesome to have around. I also got in the corner of the Rebel 285 IC, and I'm just now replacing it with the new Rustler. I just love this new Rustler and the way it's built. It's a big powerhouse for a wire feeder and exactly what I was looking for as an addition to the shop. And I'm really stoked at what they're doing around the country with the ultimate demo tour, ripping around the country, showing everyone for free how to weld with their equipment. And it's just like an open invitation for all you can weld. And what's better than that? Shout out to ESAB for doing all those great things. Now we really got to start talking things by the book because it's what separates the garage welders from the guys that are doing the really serious stuff in the field. And that's proper rod storage. I truly believe that dipping the occasional 6010 in some water isn't the end of the world. You gotta know that hydrogen is really bad for a weld. If you want to know where hydrogen is moisture, air. I live in Houston, Texas. It's all around me. I'm swimming in moisture right now. And that hydrogen likes to escape out of the weld. The best way I can show it is submerging a 7018 weld that I welded next to a 6010 weld that I welded on this little puck that I went ahead and dipped in mineral oil. You can see almost immediately a reaction reaction with the 6010 where all these bubbles start to come out. And that's that hydrogen trying to escape that weld so quickly, whereas you see the low hydrogen weld doesn't have any at all. That's the whole point. All that escaping hydrogen poses a huge problem, especially for welding high-strength steels. That's why a 7018 rod is so popular for welding high-strength steels, because it is hydrogen-free, especially when you keep it inside a rod oven where it's constantly baking out any moisture. For electrodes like a 7018, 7016, a 9045, even a lot of stainless steel electrodes like to be stored in a rod oven at 250 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. If you decide you don't want to put those rods in an oven, it's a good chance that you're going to ruin them for some work, and they're pretty expensive. What you should be doing is taking a new box of rods, and as soon as you crack the seal on them, getting them right to work right away, or moving them over into a container. For a lot of your low hydrogen rods, depending on the type and the type of resistance they may have, you can leave them outside of the box for up to 4 to 12 hours. Anytime past that, they say that if you want to use those rods again, you're supposed to put them back in an oven and turn it up to like 500 to 800 degrees Fahrenheit in order to bake out any of the hydrogen that actually got into them while they were just sitting out. And trust me, there's some limitations to that, because taking them in and out, in and out, in and out, eventually that flux, it turns into just like dust in the wind. Now, it's very often that I'm going to open a pack of rods and use just a handful of them and still have a bunch left over. I'm not about to sit there and throw them out. I'm still going to use these rods for just practice, or maybe for even these videos that I'm making, even for myself or stuff around town. I'm still going to use these exact electrodes that haven't been stored in an oven. I might do those old school tricks of just trying to get it hot. I've stuck them in my oven at home and turned it up. I've gone ahead and hit it with a torch a little bit, and even just stuck it to the material and literally just bake it from the inside out to get the moisture out of it. And that's in some extreme cases, but hey, you do what you got to do. Better than nothing. Now, that's a whole nother story when we talk about what happens on them big jobs. You just can't show up with an open pack of electrodes and a pocket full of rods and be like, I'm ready to rock and roll. It doesn't work like that. If you want the real welder money, you got to show real welder documentation of your rods and when you open them, how they've been stored. Even if the welding is just being done on some low carbon stuff, they want you to do it by the book. So much so that I've been bird dogged by the quality control, making sure that I'm not just pulling off rods that are just laying around, that I'm pulling every single rod out from that hot oven every single time I need one. Sometimes they're that paranoid, and for good reason. And if really all you need is a cheap $100 rod oven to show those companies that you're for real and you came to play, I think it's worth the investment. Now go weld something.